Hey folks, today we've got something a little bit different, but I think it should still be rather exciting. So you may have noticed I've not been posting as much lately, but you also may have noticed that I've been hinting at a possible new machine. So basically the last couple of days I've been doing an awful lot of testing, and if you follow my personal social media on Instagram and so on, you may have seen that I put up this thing, which is an acrylic test piece. Now sure, I've cut lots of acrylic before, but this one I've cut for a very specific reason, because I want to test out some of the processes that I use on this machine on the new one. So what do I mean by a new machine? Well, basically tomorrow morning I'm going to be going off to Datron to have a demo of an M8 Cube. And of course I'm very excited about this because that will be a massive step up in every single front, not only in acrylic but in aluminium, copper, brass, the lot. It's such an exciting opportunity, and quite frankly I can't wait. Now if you've been following the channel for a long time, you'll know that I love using Datron tooling already. So I've basically been using it on my CNC Step S1000T router pretty much since the beginning. They're absolutely fantastic end mills for acrylic, but also very capable in aluminium. They have a very good tool life even on a machine like this. So actually it makes handling larger cutting jobs, which for me take a very long time, really quite simple. Now I mostly use a lot of these, which are 4-in-1 end mills, and they are fantastically useful. They have a wiper polished edge to them, so they have a very clean look in acrylic. In particular, you'll know that a lot of my distro plates are incredibly clear, especially along the pockets and floors, but also on things like crystals and additional 3D elements. Now, one of the things I really want to test out with the new Datron sort of M8 Cube is how is it going to be able to do all the same kind of operations but much faster. Now, one of the big problems with my current machine is that, you can see that, my spindle, pretty basic. I don't have an automatic tool changer installed or any other system like that, so actually having to do a lot of things manually is a massive bottleneck. I also don't have a particularly powerful spindle, and I'm just using standard stepper motors and so on. I've got no Z travel. I can't really do any of the fancy stuff that I need to be able to take my work to where I want it to be. So a proper full-on industrial machine is very much on the cards, I think. I'm now going to finish getting all my stuff ready. I've got a few things that I want to bring along so that I can properly compare and contrast. But then after that it's popping to Milton Keynes to go and say hello. So I'll catch you in the morning. Well, I'll tell you what, we couldn't have picked a better morning. It's absolutely glorious. Anyway, let's get on the road. And we're here. Right, so we're here at the Datron office now, and before we go and have a proper demo of the machine, I just want to quickly introduce you to Phil over here.
Hi guys.
Hopefully he's in shot. So Phil has been handling all my tooling requests for the last 3 years now, and he's done a fantastic job. Always get tools basically the next day pretty much, quite often before I even get my quote back, which is absolutely fantastic. It allows me to keep cutting really fast and not have any downtime. So what we're going to be doing is making one of these, and this is one that was made here earlier just to test the paths out and get some ideas going, and we're going to see how that compares to the one that I cut at home. Now the thing is, this one took me about 2.5 hours, and that one took somewhere around 20 minutes or so, and that is going to be the big difference. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pop over and have a proper look at the machine, and I'll maybe explain some of the bits and bobs, and we'll see exactly what it's like to cut with one and use the next control. Whoa. Now that is a very serious piece of kit. Now it doesn't quite come across in the camera, I think, but it is huge. So if we take a look inside, to give you an idea of scale, this section up here, just where the camera's focus is roughly the same machining area as my entire CNC, and obviously I only use a portion of that at the moment, but it fills that whole area. So these are the vacuum plates. And then this is a cutout. Now on the one that I want to get, this is going to be filled with the 5th axis, and that's going to have a trunnion there, and it's going to have a 5th axis in the center here. And one crucial difference is that we've got the tool changer tool bins at the back. Now in the one I'm hoping to get, instead I'm going to have the tool changer on the right here, and that's going to be using the tool assist. So that's a big external tool changer. So that has much more tool capacity than these two, and sort of frees it up, and also means I'm not going to have issues with chips potentially. But I can also load tools offline, which is going to be a big bonus, hopefully, certainly for doing larger kind of production runs. But another big change here is that look at the size of this. So this is the next control system, and we're going to be playing around with that fairly soon. But it's huge. It doesn't really come across in the video normally because it kind of looks a bit smaller, but in person, that's a massive screen. Of course, we've got a keyboard underneath as well. I'm quite excited to have a go at this now.
Let's try it. Troubleshoot it. Make sure it's nice and tight in there. Troubleshoot it. So we recommend you don't go above 180 to 200 on here. That's basically what this does. This hydraulic pressure opens up the collet in the middle. So it goes in. You want to leave normally 25 to 30 mil out. Release the pressure. It all comes out. Make sure it's all loaded.
Oh, fantastic.
Just double check. So I've gone to about 30 out on that. You want to just check, you know, about that. 30 mil, and then just change basically the diagram for the machine purpose. Press save. You'll then come up and say, right, what toolbox you want it in? Graphics on the machine, basically mirrors what's in the machine itself. So I'm going to put it in 4 because 4 is the first sensor one I've got. Clean in, click down, and then we press save. The program has been pre-checked, all of your tools are in there, the machine's happy, it's what we do now. This is the sanity check, we do a measure all tools. So you might want to watch this a bit. So we're going to load the part using the vacuum table. Vacuum card, Sacrifice official. This is 0.7 mil thick. So if you're cutting through parts, you have got 0.7 before you start touching the vacuum table, which sometimes you have to go through if you don't want to go on the bottom edge of your job, basically.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So the part goes down there. I roughly marked where it was earlier because I knew I had a good hold on it. So once it's down, you just press the vacuum tab on there, and that part is held, and on the screen it gives you a little readout. So we're currently drawing negative 0.82 of a bar. Like that's no pressure. So count the pressure down, and that's done.
That's not a huge pressure, is it?
It's enough. Bearing in mind the biggest you can get is -1. Now active. Move the machine round. Find our part. Zoom in. And because our datum on this part is in the middle of the job, we want to find the middle of this bit of material. To do that, just draw a nice square. So what we've got here, all these are your probe points basically, and this is your Z height. So what the probe will come down, we'll measure the top of your material, know that it's a safe height, that's it, and then it will come down to each one of these points, a certain distance below the side of the job, which is normally -0.5 plus half the diameter of the ball. So the diameter of the ball is 3 mil, so it will go down about 2 mil past the side of the job. You can change that if you've got features you want to avoid. You can move where these probes basically. So if you've got a slot in here, you can move the probe to one side and you still find the centre of the job.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Correct probe. Arm comes down. So we'll do a double tap on the top. One side. So the reason it does double on the edge there is to find any rotation you might have in the part. Because this is a single side op, that's not necessarily an issue, but for flipping the part over, obviously you want to know if you're in the right spot. So once we've done that, we basically This is a sanity check. Go to your safe position. That part is now bang in the middle of that bit of material we've got.
All right, fantastic. All right, let's close this door and get things cutting, I think. Well, it's very quiet.
So this is currently cutting speed at 5 meters a minute. You had programmed it at 8 meters a minute, which is more than capable of doing, but this is a sweet way of doing it. So again, you could have probably done this a bit more aggressive if you wanted to, but it's risk and reward. You're going to put too much side load on the part.
Yeah.
And this is one of the 6 meters a minute.
Does it change the speed if you're working on a different material?
You'd have to do that in your pre-machine so in the software, yeah. But to be fair, aluminium would be okay running at this speed as well, yeah.
Wow, now that is a fantastic finish. A little bit difficult to see on the camera right now, but it is incredibly smooth on these sections here. This part here was previously surfaced, so that's what we have the lines visible just about. There we are. It's these two bits that I'm really interested in. Right, so once Phil gets the polished ball mill out of the machine, this thing is fantastic. So it's been finished off to roughly the same step overs and things as the other one. It's a little bit tricky to see what it actually looks like in the lighting because it's obviously very, very matte. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it back to the workshop and I'll film it alongside the existing one and we can get a little bit of a comparison going. So let's get back to London. Well, we're back at the workshop and I've got to admit, I am really, really quite excited. So I've got the two test pieces here in front of me. This is the one that I cut and this is the one that we cut today on the Datron M8 Cube. Now, at first glance on the camera, I've got to admit they look quite similar, but that couldn't be further from the truth in real life. So I'm just going to break down some of the big differences that I can certainly see here. So firstly, I needed to clean this quite a lot. So whilst I don't need to polish my parts off the mill, I am using the same Datron tooling as we were using today. In fact, we actually used a couple of my exact end mills that we loaded in. So I should expect a lot of similarities between this finish and this one. But there are some key differences. So the first one is that on all of these 3D surfaced parts on my machine, I have a sort of a moire type pattern here. And I think this is largely down to the fact that I'm using stepper motors. And it creates a sort of a very visual step along certain parts. And also at the same time, if anything moves in the vicinity of my machine, of course, those vibrations are all transferred into the machine itself and can mar the finish on a very superficial level. So whilst it does look very good, I've given this a very thorough cleaning to remove any of the residue, and that alone is going to buff it up a tiny bit. But the kind of moire pattern, that will never go away, and that's one big issue that I've got when I do this kind of stuff myself, and it's more apparent on aluminium. Obviously my machine can handle acrylic fine enough, but aluminium, not really. It becomes really quite noticeable on some of these sharp edges. You may have seen on parts of NSYS, for instance, where I've got 3D contoured aluminium. It's okay, it's not that great, it does take a very long time, and the Datron will be able to do that so fast. About any proper CNC will be able to do that so fast, but it's good that I can do it on the Datron for both of these materials. But one thing that's just really cool here is just it's got none of that. There's a beautiful linearity to the pattern. It's incredibly smooth, but it's also worth noting that I've used basically the same settings. So the settings that Phil put into the toolpathing here are derived off the settings that I sent for this one because we wanted to have a bit of parity and see how things go. Which does mean that this isn't actually optimized whatsoever for the machine. So for instance, on this polygon part here, I've just used a straight linear parallel toolpath. might well be better off using a different, more complicated strategy. And I don't use that on my machine because it struggles going up and down all the different axes at the same time. That's not a problem for a machine like the Datron, so I might well want to swap to something like that for this. Additionally, I probably want to use a slightly larger ball mill for this section over here, and that would mean that the smaller step over will be even less apparent in the toolpath. So it's really interesting seeing how these different parts can be optimized for the machine, because obviously I've had to make a lot of compromises to get it running on my one. Now before you say it, yeah, okay, right. Where on earth would I even fit one inside this workshop? And the truth of the matter is, it's pretty much impossible. In fact, actually, I'm pretty certain that the dimensions of that machine are exactly the same as from over here to just past where my CNC is right now. So completely impossible. It would have to be craned over the house. This is in the garden, remember? Yeah, that's not happening at all. So that means, of course, I am in the process of getting a new workshop, and I'm really excited about that one. It's going to be a little bit of time though, so even when I do have the place secured, I'm looking into a place at the moment, but even when that's all fixed up, I've still got to do things like add the flooring and renovating parts, the electrics. There's a whole process, and I will want to try sharing that with you, and it should be good fun, but it's going to take a bit of a while. So in the meantime, I'm going to be sorting out more admin related stuff regarding the machine and all the other bits and bobs that I need for that, as well as doing some more project work, which we're going to be sharing over the coming weeks. Of course, a huge thanks to Phil over at Datron for not only taking care of me over the last few years with all my tooling needs, but for explaining the machine so incredibly thoroughly today, especially in front of the camera in such an impromptu setting. Well done. It's not easy, I understand, especially going at trade shows when you're having to do everything on the fly. So massive thanks, and also cheers to Colin at Datron as well for explaining some of the further details about the different machines and the work holding solutions. Now, of course, you wouldn't want to miss any of the future updates and project bits and bobs now, would you? So the best way to stay up to date is by subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. You can also find us over on Facebook, Instagram, builds.gg and Twitter. Now, I'm going to be posting up more information sort of as it comes about my own personal workshop update adventure on my personal Instagrams. That's going to be linked below as well. So please do feel free to follow that. It's going to be a little bit different to the stuff I do at BitTech, but a lot of it will overlap quite nicely, so I think you'll probably enjoy it. Now, with all these big changes for the workshop and my machines, my role at BitTech is also going to be changing as I focus a little bit more on my own personal business. So to that extent, Model Month is now going to be taken over by the newest team member here, Andy. Now, Andy is really well versed in the BitTech modding community. Aside from having done many mods himself over the years at a very high standard, he's been a member of the forums for absolutely ages and is really in depth in the community. So I can think of absolutely nobody better to take over the role. Fear not though, I'm still going to be around for a little while longer, as I've got some fantastic project updates that I really want to share with you over the coming weeks, along with news of the new workshop changes and all of those things. There are also going to be some new additions to the team who I think you're going to find really rather exciting. So make sure you stay peeled for that. Take care folks, and I'll catch you next time.